Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the November 9th meeting of the Planning Policy to order, and it is currently 6:35 p.m. Thank you all for joining us on this dreary evening. Tonight's meeting is a hybrid meeting. Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. Stephen, I believe we do, but make it official. Do we have a quorum this evening?
Chair Voice, yes, you have a quorum, and Commissioner Kennedy has an excused absence, and Commissioner Altemer is just running a little late tonight.
Great, thank you. So our first item of business is to approve some minutes. And the first one we'll take action on are the October 18th minutes. Has everyone been able to review them? Any problems or concerns? Vice Chair Bader.
I don't know, both Commissioner Altemer and I are looking. I had an excused absence.
Great, thank you. Those comments being noted, we'll move on to the October 26th minutes. Any concerns, any problems with those minutes? All right, those meetings are approved. Next, we will address public comment. Stephen, has anyone signed up to make public comment this evening?
Chair Voice, no one has signed up, and we don't have any virtual attendees.
Great, thank you. So for tonight, our regular business is we have 3 different topic items. And the first will be the draft transportation element for the comprehensive plan periodic update. Thomas Veldrez, our senior transportation planner, will be presenting tonight. So Thomas, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Great, thank you, Chair Voice. 1 second. Great, thanks for having me here tonight. I really appreciate your time. My name is Thomas Valdrez. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner at Issaquah, and tonight I will be discussing the transportation element draft goals and policies. So just some questions to consider as I roll through this. Do have 3 questions for the Commission tonight. First question is, does the Commission have any feedback on the proposed updates? Are the goals and policies consistent with the land use element goals and policies, and are we missing any topics in the goals and policies? So just some background here. The mobility element, which we also call the transportation element, is required by the GMA. This guides transportation policy over the next 20 years. And for this update, there's a new environmental element as a result of HB 1181. So what we have here is some of the existing mobility element goals and policies will be moving over to the environmental element. These are the policies related to greenhouse gas reductions. So it just, for consistency and to consolidate, we will be proposing to move some of those policies over to the environment section. So for this periodic update, we're really just looking to do a basic course correction. This is just to coordinate with existing functional plans that have been added since the last update, which we did in 2020. So really just doing some minor tweaks in order to coordinate with these plans. And so some of these plans include the Mobility Master Plan, which is the primary functional plan for the transportation element. We also have the Street Standards Update, which we updated last year, actually mid-year, I think it was May. And so this document is really looking at the design and construction of streets throughout the city. Land Use Code Update, there was some specifics on parking and multimodal connections that were added, so I want to respect those throughout this document. We also have some plans in development, so the ADA transition plan, which looks at adding equity and improving access, and the transit study, which is obviously looking at transit enhancements. And so since the 2020 update, that's really sort of what we're looking at, just kind of doing some minor tweaks for this periodic update. This should look pretty familiar. This slide is what we've been showing for many of these. This is really just sort of showing how the functional plans are fed in via the vision, goals, and policies of the element. And so how we have this organized is as such. We have proactive safety, climate and quality of life, multimodal balance system. We also have walking, biking, transit, and auto travel. So pretty comprehensive in terms of how the document talks to all the specific modes throughout the city. And so looking at the recommended changes that staff has for you tonight, for HB 1181, this is dictating some new goals and policies that we need to align with. As I mentioned earlier, the environmental element is leading us to relocate some of the policies from transportation, where they originally were, over to the environment. We're also proposing some new changes to ensure that we're being proactive about climate resiliency, being proactive about natural disaster response. We also have some policies to support multimodal transportation choices, transit service, and then making sure that our parking policies are right-sized for the current and future needs. And so we did take this to the TAB for their last meeting. In general, I would say that the TAB was very supportive of all the proposals. They did have some minor recommendations in order to tweak what we do have in here. So on this slide, I've sort of outlined some of them. Looking at specific land use policies was one of the responses. Staff is hoping to keep T policy C5 as it is. We think that waiting and not being too overly prescriptive will be better in the long run for us. We're looking at doing some visioning and creating some guiding principles for potential light rail stations. So we sort of have too many unknowns at this point. We don't want to be overly prescriptive until we know how that is better going to shake out. So just trying to keep it more open for that one. For T policy F1, we did add frequency as one of the desired transit service enhancements. So we felt that that was a really good comment, and we wanted to also add that. For T policy B1, the TAB was interested in specifying non-single occupancy vehicle mode share goals. Again, staff feels that this might be overly specific. The city's really interested in reducing single occupancy vehicle trips. How we get there is less of a concern, and we don't want to be overly prescriptive on this one. And the last recommendation that the TAB had was related to autonomous vehicles and automated driving systems. Staff feels that we've adequately covered this under the proactive safety section, as well as the electric vehicle policies. So that's sort of what we heard from TAB, and again, overly pretty supportive of everything that we have here tonight. So at this point, I think I'll just kick it back to Chair Boyce, just hoping to get feedback on these 3 questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Commissioners, now is your time to shine. Commissioner Krass.
Hello. By the way, the autonomous vehicles is really interesting, because I don't think anybody really knows, but I think there's probably big implications from a land use standpoint too. So that's years away. You have a place for them to wait to go into use and all. That wasn't my question. One of the things that I looked at, especially at the vision, the few big call outs, something that's top of mind, I would believe, with almost every resident in Issaquah, is around congestion. And I'm curious, I'm sure you had some thoughts of whether you made that a high level vision and goal of really dealing with specific congestion. I know you can't build your way out of it, but there's certain places, I'll use Front Street as some of us who aren't here yet, or who are who are facing that. So I'm just curious of what your thoughts are of how you think about that, and then as this goes to a wider populace, you know, if you ask everyone, they care about that, but that word is nowhere to be.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Kress. We are addressing congestion I don't have the specific goal and policy in front of me, but it is in the auto section. So I think it's the first one. It's related to level of service at signalized intersections. So we are interested in making sure that congestion is where it should be. It shouldn't be like too bad at signalized intersections, and we measure that on a scale from A to, I think, F. So citywide, our policies like can't be worse than D, unless it's at a WSDOT intersection, then it can be E. So we do address that. It's like the first one in the auto section, but yeah, definitely. I hear you about congestion. That's definitely something that we're super interested in making sure that it stays within the parameters of what we consider as being reasonable.
If I might add a little more, Commissioner Cass, you know, when the mobility master plan was put together to update the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, one of the biggest goals in that was to prioritize multimodal transportation as a way of tackling congestion, mostly of offering people more options to be able to get around beyond just single occupancy vehicles. And so broadly throughout the transportation element and the mobility master plan, and somewhat indirectly, it's looking at tackling the congestion problem primarily of providing more options, mostly to get at the point of what you said. We can't build our way out of congestion. So one of the most efficient things, particularly to meet our environmental goals, is to focus more on the multimodal side of what we're offering the community.
One thing, so I totally get, and that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of it like, it looks like it's just missing, meaning I'm not sure if these plans have a section for non-goals, and or just be able to stay, because it's one of the hottest topics when you think about transportation, and as a high-level goal, or at least discussion, you don't want to have to like, oh, go click 3 layers down to see, oh, what does it mean? All constituents know is they just sat for 45 minutes and it's only getting worse because of, I'm not sure how to tackle that, but it's something that I would just hope would be noted so people don't have the same level of questioning every time you talk about them.
I suppose, Chair Voice here, I suppose I'll kind of piggyback on Commissioner Kraft. So I understand what Stephen's saying, different levels, multimodal system is designed to alleviate that. I guess one question for you guys, and not to put you on the spot, but how much of the traffic in Issaquah would you say currently is single occupancy vehicle? 80%?
I don't want to give you the wrong number, so I'd have to get back to you. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but it is high.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's obviously higher than 50% because that's our goal. So the only thing that caught my eye was policy G2, policy G2, and it says greater levels of auto delay may be permissible. Are we saying that is more congestion is permissible for X, Y, and Z? Because I see kind of, again, if you ask the residents of Issaquah, traffic is always the singular concern. And I know while the city and the council, again, administration and so forth, want to tackle a bunch of different goals, and again, that's appropriate, it seems kind of like, and again, to Stephen's point, there's all these other ways to do that, and we're trying to do it by alleviating it by offering more different transportation modes. But then I see something like policy G2. It kind of flies in the face again to me of what the residents truly want, which is some great relief, at least in certain choke points in the city. So I guess my question to you, Thomas, is G2. What does G2 look like? And not so much in theory, but in actual reality.
Could I get someone to feed me what G2 says?
Yes, greater levels of auto delay may be permissible where mitigations to improve intersections level of service would degrade conditions for people using other modes or would result in projects that are unaffordable to the city. That's a wide net.
Yeah. So yeah, the intent is really just to make sure that other modes are not being affected, right? So it's about balancing the needs of all. So it's a pretty broad statement. So I'm going to give you a broad answer here.
It's a lot of wiggle room, but then I go back to, you know, and again, I'm going back to, I believe this is page 24 of 117. What policy is this? This is policy D1. Tier 4, lower speed limits to 20 miles per hour on all local streets, including commercial areas outside central Issaquah Growth Center, Old Town, Issaquah Highlands, commercial areas. And before the meeting started, just talking a little bit back and forth, you know, so again, if you wanted to put 2 sidewalks on the side, again, that gives people more opportunity to walk, but in certain areas of the city, that also slows traffic down, right? You know, more crosswalks, more people walking. Does that go into the thinking at all?
I'm not sure how much of a measurable difference it would make for slowing down. Yeah, it depends on the context, land use context. If you're near a school, for example, and there's a lot of kids crossing, that would be sort of part of the equation. You would consider how that would affect, you know, traffic flow, but also there's like safety improvements that could be part of that equation. So it's really, yeah, just sort of balancing. There's so many different needs in transportation. So all of this to say, we definitely consider all these trade-offs whenever we make improvements. But yeah, hopefully that sort of helps with that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Krass?
The one more thing, I always look at these, and there's a lot of them, say, well, what is the role that the city has in a policy? And only one popped out, and it's pretty small, but I'll use as an example. But it's always, I think, important for us to understand. Just encourage, or is it more directed on that one? There's one about e-bikes and policy E2. And I'm a cyclist, so I understand how to ride a bike and where they go on the street. And I just wasn't sure what the role of the city is, and is that really any different than just cycling, period? And if you have great places for bikes to ride, then e-bikes follow suit, or is there something different and specific for e-bikes? And I think one was scooters, the shared bikes and shared scooters. It was unclear, so it was interesting to drill into that, and it may already be covered, and also the broader point is what's the role of the city on those?
Yeah, and so I think I can sort of try to answer this question. So again, this flowchart sort of helps me think about. So for example, in the Issaquah Municipal Code, recently updated the parking section. We have provisions on you know, long-term bike storage, for example. We also know that the community loves riding bikes. We have a lot of hills. So, and you know, we know that e-bikes can sort of help bridge the gap between someone's willingness to, you know, go up and down a hill. If you're assisted, that sort of helps with that. So through this document, with the goal of adding, you know, more e-bike usage, we hope that can filter into the functional plans, and then resources would be therefore allocated towards making that happen.
So encouraging e-bike usage has a couple different, you could say people have their own e-bikes and you have safe places for them to ride it. That's one thing. The other is you open it up to have shared e-bike and e-scooters, and then the city says we're going to give places in the city for these things to be parked and managed. The other one is the city is involved in supporting and applying these. So it was just unclear of what the role is in that. So that's all I was.
Yeah, I guess the point of this policy is to open the door to possibilities like that. We do see in some cities e-bike, you know, shared e-bikes have taken off. That can sort of help with equity, adding access to people that couldn't normally afford an e-bike. It also sort of helps you try out an e-bike. So some of the comments that we've heard throughout this process for the transit study, sort of ways to link transit. Some of the comments we've heard are related to e-bike libraries. So that would be like potentially like a city or like some business has them to like lend out, sort of like a book, like a library book. There's also like all sorts of programs that we've looked at micromobility as an option. So that's like the connected e-bikes that you can hail from an app and you can ride that around. So this is sort of more of a general goal, more of a general policy in order to like open the door to those conversations so that we're thinking about those over the next 20 years.
If I might be able to add, Commissioner Grass, the other portions of the city's roles in the part of regulation and education. So part of what Thomas was bringing up with land use code update with the bike parking standards, we require hookups for people to be able to charge their e-bikes in new developments or retrofitted existing developments. The other part is the education and let the community know e-bikes are an option, and whether it's partnerships with businesses or with any of the libraries or lending programs, getting those programs out into the community so people can experience these e-bikes and potentially find a use for it throughout their kind of lifestyle.
Commissioner Samweta?
Yeah, as we look at the multimodal approach, are we also looking at dedicated lanes to bikes as well as even buses? I know that would probably require some additional right-of-way per se.
Yeah, it's
or even different routes that those bikers can take as well to get people off of certain roads.
Yeah, that definitely, that speaks to our goal of complete streets. We map out where bike facilities are currently, and within the transportation element and the mobility master plan, we talk about sort of how bike lanes should feel. We use level of traffic stress as our metric. So there's some details within that, but it's basically like how you feel as you're riding your bike. Depending on the road, we do have standards that we are hoping to improve upon based on certain specific roads, and that really just sort of varies throughout the city depending on where it's at. But definitely we want to consider that with relationship to I think you're talking about bus lanes. We don't currently have those, but that's not to say we couldn't. That would sort of be a larger policy discussion, but that could certainly stem from having the overarching goal of multimodal connectivity. So this sort of just like starts the conversation, and then within the functional plans, we could get into the weeds about like what to actually implement where it makes sense.
Yeah, because it's trying to move people from those traffic choke points, even though that some of those traffic choke points may be a destination for certain people, but maybe moving them to a distance where it's walkable, so that they're not part of that traffic.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Samweta. Commissioner Milligan.
Thank you. I want to join in on this bike talk. Thank you for your comments, both of you, +1 to them. And there are two things that I wanted to talk about. One was the bike share program, and the other is just the encouraging of e-bikes as a general term. Because, as you may have noticed, not all e-bikes are equal. Some of them are motorcycles. And we haven't had an opportunity to really distinguish what we're trying to encourage. And so if we could perhaps add the language that identifies the class or whatever modifier it is that distinguishes what a bike that is facilitated to go up a hill rather than just a different kind of motorbike, and language that would provide for the opportunity to enforce when e-bikes or motorized vehicles are on pedestrian trails or trails that do not allow motorized vehicles. And then the second thing had to do with bike share. The policy is, and it's an additional policy if I understand correctly, or a new one, pursue partnerships or investments in micromobility options such as a bike and scooter share and e-bike library programs. And if we do pursue something like this, I sure hope our city would also at the same time pursue the issue of bike share littering, or how these things are managed when these programs come in, because it can be such a blight on our beautiful city. So I'd like to see that. And then also, as an edit, you could say pursue partnerships or investments in micromobility options, and then parenthetical, such as bike, scooter share, and e-bike programs. Maybe you already have that in there. It's kind of hard to the way it's highlighted here. But the another program that I wanted to share was one from Nelson, British Columbia. And as a pilot program, Nelson, British Columbia, through a grant program that they implemented in their city, they bought bikes for their city employees, because it's a hilly city too. It's very much like here. It's a great, great example to set alongside us. They bought bikes for their city employees so that they could ride to work and ride home. And that proved a point to the entire community. And the reason I like that program much better than a bike share program is that it gives the ownership and the pride and the care to somebody for a very similar cost. So I'd like us to look at that kind of program rather than these share bikes that tend to get just dropped off on the side of the street or in the street, for that matter.
Thank you, Commissioner Milligan. Yeah, the whole library thing, I'm thinking about used books and books don't come back. Thank you. Vice Chair Bader.
Yeah, I'll kind of build on this a little bit. I have like an unformed thought in my head, but so with that e-bike policy, it refers specifically to hilly neighborhoods. And I live in a hilly neighborhood, right, where it's 100%, I live in Tallis, so it's 100% car dependent. It's either drive your car out or you're like walking up a mountain. And that's like, those are our options. And so I was like, ooh, maybe an e-bike, right, that I can rent is like an option. Because I don't actually live that far from anywhere, but I have to drive everywhere, right? But without then like a place to drop that off at like the top of Tallis Drive, I'm no better off, right? Because I'm not going to like start my trip down like at the grocery store, right? Or like, I'm going to start my trip at home. And so if I can't get one at home, then it doesn't do me any good in like my hilly neighborhood. And so like, are there, all of the stuff about like, bikes left on the streets aside, like, are there provisions that actually would then like allow that within a neighborhood, like a residential neighborhood? Because like, I don't see a bus right coming up into Tallis, but like maybe we can have e-bikes just to help us get up and down the hill, like if nothing else. And so I don't know where I'm going with that, but like, are we included, right, in that, and all of this good stuff that's like coming to Issaquah, or is it only for those who live on like the valley floor?
Sort of jump in here. There's different models on how you run a e-bike program. I think one of the hang-ups when we did look at this, I think it was last year, was, the geographic extent of where these things would be allowable, and then companies also like replenish based on like where people are riding and all that. So there's a whole like network analysis that these companies will be doing to like optimize. But we definitely want to, if we do one of these programs in the future, we'll want to have those conversations about where these where like sort of the bubble of like service would be relative to like where people are riding. I was just in New York last weekend, and they have city bike programs, so they have like physical stations. I ran into an issue of trying to park my bike, but the entire stall was taken by other bikes. So there's trade-offs with any situation, but we'll want to sort of think about what makes sense for this community when that time comes. And there's so many companies out there, so you'll just want to pick the right one also. We go in that direction.
Great, thank you, Thomas. I mean, obviously, it's in its infancy. You guys will have to consider many, many things. And to Commissioner Milligan's point, everything from, you know, the CCs or the motor size, you know, speed limits, again, are they on pedestrian walkways? So lots to talk about. I know it's still very young. I do really appreciate that example of Nelson, though. That's great, because it's always great to hear cities that have done it well. Not going to knock the city that lives around us, but I see them littered around everywhere. And it's sad because they're expensive, and you see them just sitting right on a sidewalk on its side. So, yeah, thank you for providing an example.
I will just add, so the city of Issaquah has started to purchase electric bikes for operations staff. So our parks operations employees do have e-bikes to be able to go to other areas of the city that are either inaccessible by vehicle or actually easier because of the traffic throughout the city. So that's been something that's fairly popular with some of our operations staff to be able to use, and hopefully we'll be able to expand that.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this, Commissioner Patterson?
Just one thing to add on that too is maybe I'm getting a little too much in the weeds, but I can't say enough about a good pilot program, meaning before we go head first into some kind of an agreement, you know, taking the opportunity to pilot different options and not do a full-on commitment until we see how it works. I would just advise if that could be built in later down the road.
Excellent point. Commissioner Milligan.
Are you ready to move on from bikes? I
Yeah.
want to go back to traffic.
Sure.
And thank you, Chair Voice, for pointing out the policy later that said that we could allow for decreased level of service for vehicles, especially if another modality needed the accommodation. What I wanted to ask about was this is more a comment. When we talk about concurrency, there's an impact fee with an expectation of a level of service. And how long is that level of service supposed to be there when a developer or whoever it is pays this impact fee? You don't have to really answer that, except that how do we handle this going forward if we're saying, no, we're going to allow our level of service to decrease? When do we not require or refund somebody's investment in a level of service that was expected to not just benefit the greater community, but to benefit the business or the development or whatever it was that they contributed to the city? So how does that play with concurrency?
Yeah, I think I'll just add that you know, we are looking towards potentially updating the way that we do concurrency, looking at multimodal as a potential option. That sort of gets at your point of, you know, considering all modes and not just autos with concurrency. But yeah, I mean, developers have options to try to mitigate transportation trips for their development. So there's, you know, we have a menu of options that can sort of help, you know, make sure that they're not creating too many trips that would trigger some bigger improvement. But yeah, I think that sort of gets at what you're saying.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm just introducing a broader discussion when it comes and making sure that people are listening. When we do talk about concurrency, they should listen. Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask about the achieve 50% single occupant vehicle mode share by 2023. And it's end of 2023 now, and we're talking about achieving that goal by 2030. And Chair Voice's question earlier is, where are we now? And are we sticking with that number? Is that number aspirational? What does that number mean when we don't have the incremental goals that are getting taken out of the policy? How do we handle that? I just can't imagine 50% in 2030.
Yeah, I guess all I'll say about this is we were not proposing a change to it, simply being more specific with how we were saying it. So we had previously said 15% increase but we didn't say what that was, like what the baseline was. So I guess I have no comment other than I was just trying to clean up shop, but that could be just a broader conversation on knowing that it'll be here before we know it. So
one thing to add is, all of our targets are always aspirational, especially when it's established in the comprehensive plan being the city's vision for the next 20 years. And so to kind of get to your question of is it aspirational, it is. But a lot of the strategies built into this element in the mobility master plan go at trying to achieve this. Will we achieve it? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, it gives us at least the justification for a lot of the efforts that we're trying to push towards achieving the target as well.
Commissioner Kraft?
There are two questions on that. One is, do we know what the baseline is now? And if so, is that if you can't measure it, then you can't have a goal. But it's like, I assume we would, or, because I don't know if we're at 2% or if we're at 17%, it's a different thing.
I could get you it so quick.
But it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It exists. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I just don't have it up
Can I
here
answer
right
it?
now.
Because it says it on in our paper.
That's what it was in 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it?
65 in
65%
2017.
In 2017.
Okay.
So I think
Yeah.
that's the baseline that the 50% was created from.
Got it. And then the other thing is, and this may be getting too, breaking it out, is everything created equal, or do you have different types of zones for different goals? Like you may have a different goal of single occupancy in different parts or different types of areas. That's all. I wasn't sure if that gets too complicated. I'm glad there is a baseline. So 65% now going to 50. That's not crazy. Okay. Well, but also you may find it's on Front Street, it's very different because they're all going through to work back and forth from Black Diamond or I'm not sure how as you think about that. I agree with having something aspirational and measurable, and then the question is, do you have something different for different types of things? That's all.
Sounds like it's a city average, right?
Yeah.
Right, because to your point, Issaquah Highlands has very different traffic versus Front Street. People are obviously heading to 18.
But the hard part is when you have an average for something very different. It's like saying, what's the average house in the United States cost? Oh, it's $310,000, but that doesn't really mean anything anywhere.
Right, Issaquah Highlands in 10 years could be almost down to nil, right, on single occupancy vehicles, while Front Street is, still keeping us up at 60%. Vice Chair Bader.
My finger was ready to go. This is just a little comment that I don't even need to give, but when I read that policy that achieve 50% single occupancy, first I was thinking what is SOV? But then it felt like that was a good thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like the achieve word felt like it's something we're trying to get away from, but it's worded as a yay, regardless, even at 50%, right? And so I like the previous language better of the reduced by 15% as opposed to achieve 50%, just because it felt like we were going for something that we don't ultimately want, right? But we're going to celebrate. I'd rather celebrate the reduction than the target, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we could come back and massage that language. Yeah.
Again, it was just what I wrote down.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, great point, Vice Chair Bader. And thank you, Stephen, because obviously it is an aspirational document. Would anyone like to follow up on our transportation element? Please, it's your time.
This is it.
Commissioner Milligan.
Okay, thank you. Hi. C5, the land use thing about sound transit. And the way that it's written, if I understand correctly, is partner with Sound Transit in bringing light rail service to Issaquah by adopting supportive land use policies and creating safe multimodal connectivity to the new station. And under the tab column, it said, consider specifying which land use policies. I wholeheartedly agree. One of the concerns that we've had, and I remember this from being on the tab, is the need for parking for a terminus light rail station, and we didn't want Issaquah to turn into a parking lot. So that would be a supportive land use policy. We will dedicate so many acres to, anyway, you could just change the word "and" to "by," so that it says adopting supportive land use policies by creating safe multimodal, and then you're not saying by doing any other land use policy. Or you could add to this by saying except for dedicated parking or something. Anyway, the concern of mine that I have is parking in Issaquah. Thank you.
Commissioner Patterson.
I was going to tack on to that topic as well. Mostly just, I know you had kind of mentioned, I think that this is sort of a like more to come, meaning like we're still 20-ish years from light rail, but I think, we obviously want to start thinking about it. So I guess when is the next opportunity to add more about light rail to these plans and policies, goals and policies?
I'm really glad you asked that question. So our plan for next year is to really start doing some engagement, acknowledging that it's a sound transit project, but the city has obviously a stake in it. So we want to work with Sound Transit to make sure that whatever location and alignment is reflective of like the community's wants and desires. So we can try to influence that. And that sort of starts with the transit study. And one of the things that came out of that is really acknowledging that there's a need to be concrete with what the community wants. So over the next year, we're going to try to create some guiding principles, like our North Star. Trying not to be overly specific because Sound Transit has a process, and we're sort of trying to shepherd it as best we can. But if we have a North Star, we can at least have that idea of where we want to go, and we'll make incremental actions to try to make that a reality. So just all that to say, in the next year or so, we'll be holding a series of outreach opportunities for the community, and yeah, there will be more to come. This group will also be receiving that. But yeah, more to come.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, Thomas. And that was a great response. Always beware of the guy that tells you, thank you, and I was looking forward to ask me that question, right? But no, that was a great response. And again, obviously Sound Transit's going to have their say. And I think, like you said, keeping it options open, starting to do your research is what the community wants, and having North Star and realizing that it's going to be a give and take with them. Commissioner Samweta.
Yeah, and are there like any incentives where Issaquah residents would have discounts on parking per se? And that would be able to provide more of a benefit to Issaquah residents, or a certain portion of the parking for Issaquah residents, as opposed to people who may come from the east that may utilize Sound Transit to get into the city per se.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that has been brought up, and this is related to a Sound Transit parking structure that's adjacent to a light rail station. Sound Transit has their own way of doing parking policies for their facilities. They're currently, I think this month, they're looking at existing conditions, what the parking demand is currently at different stations, and sort of thinking about ways to manage parking. Sometimes that's by charging. So if you charge, then there's less demand. Whereas if it was free, maybe you'd be more willing to just drive there and park there to use their system. I've not heard of any communities being able to get community, like a resident parking pass or whatever for a Sound Transit facility, but I'll acknowledge I haven't looked too deep into it, but I imagine that that may not be an option for Sound Transit facilities.
Okay, because I believe in certain jurisdictions, they do have something like that, but of course, maybe not with Sound Transit as well. Okay,
Yeah, we could certainly look into it though.
okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Milligan, and then I think we still have 2 more elements to go. So
Thank
we've
you.
still got a lot more
I know
fun.
this is the best one, though. Thank you for asking that question. Jesse, I think that we can't start soon enough to talk about how City of Issaquah land may be used for parking, and that even more than a North Star, that we should draw a line, not just in the sand, but carve it in the rock. And sure, there's going to be give and take, but we're going to have to start out ahead in order to get anywhere near what we want when there's something so powerful as a regional transportation body like Sound Transit coming in and telling us what to do. And then to your point, though, if Sound Transit facility, we can't control that, but we could control a municipal parking. We can also control street parking if we'd start doing that sooner rather than later. City of Mercer Island has special permitting for street parking, and that's a model that we could look at. And Seattle does too. Yeah. So and permitted regional, neighborhood parking solutions that we could start with now rather than waiting for later. So just thank you for coming back to me, because I think it is urgent.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, Thomas, I hope got what you needed on that transportation element. Thomas is also going to be presenting our next topic. So I believe this is the draft utilities and public services element. Again, ready for a lively discussion.
Great. Thanks again, Chair Voice. Yeah, so this is the utilities and public services element, draft goals and policies. So again, I have some questions for the Commission to consider. Does the Commission have any feedback on the proposed updates? Are the proposed goals and policies consistent with land use element goals and policies? Does the proposed vision accurately describe what's desired for utilities? And are there topics not being addressed in the proposed goals and policies? So again, some background. The utilities element is required per the GMA. However, we do add the public services to that. That's just a Issaquah thing. Other cities do it other ways, but we're really just acknowledging that police, fire, and EMS are important to our community, and so we're sort of lumping this together with utilities. And so this document is really just looking at utilities and public services policy over the next 20 years. And this new update, we're just like the transportation element, we're trying to coordinate with where we have new functional plans. And those plans include different updates to the utility plans that we've done over the last couple of years. The street standards, which I talked about previously with the transportation element, which guides the design and construction of streets. There's some utility service specific provisions that were added to Title 18, and the Issaquah Police Department has a policy manual that was developed in 2020. So this is sort of reflecting all of the changes since the last time we did an update to this element, and just coordinating with other plan documents. So again, this is that classic slide showing how the element connects with the functional plans. And I wanted to sort of pause on this slide a little bit just to showcase what we're doing here. With this update, we're proposing a significant amount of organizational changes to the document. This is really just to improve the efficiency and reduce redundancies that are currently throughout the document. So this reorganized document has all these sections talking about level of service and future needs, designing and siting of utilities and public services, coordinating and collaborating service delivery, and so on. And so the recommended changes are really just to, again, reduce redundancy, coordinating with county, regional, and state policies, making sure that we're all in alignment with how we're providing services. This also is hoping to improve on our climate resiliency and our ability to respond to natural disasters. And there's some provisions on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing equity. So I'll just briefly go over, there's quite a few minor changes throughout this document, given that we are reorganizing a lot. So I think I have 6 slides that are talking about all the changes, but I'll just sort of roll through these and then we can go into more detail after. The goal A, that's talking about the, sorry, I'll go back here. So the vision statement. Vision statement was changed. It was revised to really help be more specific. We also wanted to add some provisions just to emphasize public services and environment that was previously lacking from the vision statement. With goal A, this was revised to be more of a goal statement. It was previously written not as a goal. And then most of goal A is revised to reduce redundancies and improve service outcomes. For goal B, this is designing and siting of utilities and public services. The overall flavor of this is that we wanted to reduce redundancies and improve clarity, and then make sure that we were being consistent with local and county policies. For goal C, this is about coordinating and collaborating with service providers. There were several policies in the existing document that talk about collaboration and coordinating, so this is sort of reflecting what was seen throughout many sections of the document. So we wanted to reduce redundancies and add clarity by just making it its own section and trimming it out from several others. For D, this was about resource conservation, and again, this is aligning with our sustainability and environmental goals and reducing redundancies. For goal E, this is about water and utility service. The goal here was to reduce redundancies and add clarity. You'll note here E11 has a strike through. As I was going through the document, as I was preparing for this presentation, I did realize that there was another redundancy that I failed to miss. So E11 is redundant with E8, so I'm hoping to remove that as well. Goal F is about wastewater utility services, and changes are to support service outcomes and align with sustainability and environmental goals, and again, reduce redundancies. Goal G is stormwater, and we're hoping to ensure consistency and support service outcomes. With that, I will again kick it over to Chair Boyce. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Open it up. Commissioner Krass?
Utilities are important, but maybe not as charged as transportation. But so I just had 2 questions. The first one, and I was looking for an intersection for housing, land use, and all that. When we think of developers, is there thoughts? I'm not sure whether it would be a policy or some other type of element that talks about how do we make it easier for people to build in Issaquah. And I'm not saying reduce standards, but maybe just make it so we're a much easier place when it comes to these complicated things across all these different utilities for someone to build. And we want them to build housing, which we spent a lot of time in here, versus other places. So that was question 1. Question 2 is totally unrelated, so I'll turn it over for that one.
Great. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to make everything clearer. So this is an example of we have redundancy throughout the whole document, and if we can trim it down and make it more concise, that should help. That was one of the goals with Title 18, with the land use code update. Requirements were scattered throughout so many documents, and it became really confusing for developers to trying to do the right thing, but they just didn't know where to look. And so now everything is in one document, it's in one place, and that's should make things easier. We do have building standards that we've adopted through the state. I think that there's new updates coming with that to sort of improve clarity. But again, yeah, on our side, we're trying to make things much clearer, much more streamlined from the permitting process, from the regulation standpoint, while still maintaining the standards that we need for life and safety and all that.
Question 2. When we think about utilities, I noticed on your slide, the icon was the Wi-Fi icon. So is internet and Wi-Fi considered a utility? And if so, how does Issaquah think about whether you have public Wi-Fi or other services? Because then it also touches into areas that may have not very, people can't afford it, or it's not available. So it has other implications. So is that considered a utility, and where would that fall?
Yeah, telecommunications is part of that. Yeah, and I know that the city is very interested in making sure that there's equitable access to Wi-Fi. So yeah, that sort of falls within this policy.
Oh, I didn't see it. I saw water, I saw sewage, I saw runoff. I guess I'll have to go back. Was there telecommunications that I missed? Or?
Yeah, just to add more information. So the city itself, we are responsible solely for wastewater, sewage, and like water service. And then there's other companies that provide service to the city, but we're sort of the city as a government organization does not provide that, but we do have standards that we want private companies to follow. So this document sort of touches on that we have standards, we have levels of service that we are hoping to achieve, and we work with, we're hoping to coordinate and collaborate with other service providers to make sure that our service levels are being met in the way that we are asking for and are required to provide.
Commissioner Samweta?
Is there like a utility master plan that's integrated with the capital improvement plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are several different functional plans that get at the very specifics of each service provided, and those are integrated with how we design our streets. So there's in the street standards, there's utilities design guidelines, and there is cross-pollination within the functional plans. But yeah, each one of them is very specific to the service being provided.
Okay, and then it factors in proposed future development.
Right, and they are all coordinated with the capital improvement plan. Yep.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Bader?
Yeah, so what a surprise. I have like equity considerations for this thing. I feel more charged about this than I do about transportation. I don't know if trash is included, but my trash bill just went way up. But from a, yeah, I guess I just consider traffic part of life, but I'm like, you increase my trash bill and I'm like gonna come at you. But anyway, we had talked about like not affordable housing, like the purchase price, but then the affordability of like living right in that house. And I think utilities are like directly tied to that. And so I guess a couple of comments. There's a policy, I don't know, it's in the B section, that like gets at rate assistance, but like utilities are like really directly connected to like people's health, right? Because there's medications that need to be refrigerated, and what if you can't afford your electricity? And so kind of to the comment about like the city provides water and sewage and wastewater, the people within the city, right, need all utilities. And so does there need to be like direct consideration in here of like maintaining access to utilities. And I don't know if that exists in like the human services policy or plan, which I really need to read, but I have babies and I haven't gotten to read it yet. Or like, should it live here as kind of an expansion of that like rate assistance for low income seniors policy?
So it sounds like your statement's more about where this lives, right? Or is it?
It's a question about where it lives,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't live anywhere, like, should it live here? Because I
Yeah.
think that just like the ability for people to afford utilities needs to be a priority for the city, as well as like programs to assist, right?
Yeah, so yeah, we do have it in here currently. That's not to say that
Yeah.
it doesn't need to live here. I can take this back to staff and see sort of where.
Yeah, because even like building on that, when I read the vision, it doesn't feel like it gets to that. It feels more about like where are you, like where are things cited, and not about like then the impacts of people using them. And so I would want to see that in the vision, that it's also about like consistent and reliable access to utilities, and not just that they exist in the city.
Yeah, it's a really, really good comment. Yeah, often utilities, we think about sort of the engineering function of it and like how it operates, but not like the people aspect and the users and the need. That, yeah, good point.
Commissioner Samweta?
And even pilot onto that, there's the assistance piece for when the utilities, let's say energy, are in their current state, and I'll utilize them, whether natural gas or hydroelectric, electricity per se, but certain areas, more underserved areas, maybe still using natural gas, but then more developed or newer areas would be utilizing new forms of energy. So that transition period, essentially providing assistance for some of those old technologies transitioning into the new technologies. I think there needs to be a vision within the policy that shows that from an asset planning standpoint, this is where we're going, as opposed to, yes, we have the standards, but when we look at planning for rehabilitation and repair and replacement as well, we have to put that within our policies as well, to get essentially the communities aligned.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And we do have, within our utilities functional plans, we do sort of touch on that. I'm not aware of the extent of how detailed it gets with that, given that we receive, service from, third-party providers. But yeah, I can certainly look into that a little bit more, see how that looks, and maybe potentially coordinate policies along those lines.
Yeah, and I think that's essentially what it is, that coordination. We have a vision of how our community should look and be, and it's coordinating with those outside providers as well as providers within the city to meet the community's needs.
Great point.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yeah, so overall, when we set out on this mission to review all of these different elements, I think a lot of themes were brought up that were going to be kind of consistent throughout, things like climate, the environment, equity. And I think this is a compliment, by the way. I think the staff has done a great job threading that needle through each element and making it specific to that element. And I think now we've seen, I think, almost all of them, hopefully, that for the first time anyway. It seems like overall, like in this one specifically, you can see how you're addressing things like environment, climate, and equity, but specific to utilities. And I think that became really apparent. Like when we first started out and we were looking at land use, I was like, how are they going to, create these divisions between all of these sections? And I think now that we've, especially coming off the environmental one, which was newer, I think last meeting, and then now moving to this one, I'm now seeing very clearly how much thought and effort was put into that. Now, it's not perfect. There's definitely always room for improvement, but I think overall, I have been really impressed with how that has all kind of lined up over time. So I do have one question to kind of piggyback on that, though, is, fitting things into the right element. And that's regarding policy policy D15, and it's related to requiring restaurants to use compostable and reusable elements. I totally agree with the policy. I'm just curious how it fits into utilities. Like, I understand compost is a waste, management, but in terms of the requiring restaurants, would that be considered maybe somewhere more, I don't know, like economic or maybe environmental? I'm not sure. Just kind of want to throw it out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. On first glance, it does look out of place, but this document is also including other public services. Solid waste is the one that it's referring to. So I guess this is more about the overarching goal of, wanting to reduce the amount of stuff that's going to the landfills, really. So yeah, I think this one is specific to like the bulk of material that is going into the trash. So yeah, point taken. It could live in other places too. Thematically, it's about reducing waste. So I think it sits here well because it is this policy is really about trash and like trash reduction and like diverting materials.
Yeah.
So,
I think then to kind of take the feedback further would be then, is there an opportunity to broaden that to go beyond requiring restaurants and just say like disposable packaging for whether it be stores, any vendor basically of the city? Like if the goal is to reduce waste or, compostable waste, like is there an opportunity to broaden that to include a wider audience than just restaurants?
good point.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson, and thank you for the question. And yes, I think we are truly lucky. We do have a tremendous staff. Did see a couple hands, I thought. Oh, look at this. You go.
Okay, I'll jump in because
Okay,
I'm
Commissioner
piggybacking on Jesse's point. Yeah, I didn't like targeting restaurants if it's food service, and if we really care, it would be grocery stores, takeout, everybody who does at a restaurant, a certain thing, and it's unfortunate if don't cover the use that we're trying to cover rather than just an industry segment. And then the other, it does not say to support it with the waste stream facilities that go along with it.
Commissioner Samweta.
Yeah, she took the thunder.
Oh.
So
Oh.
I was pretty much going to say the same thing, and just keeping it consistent so it's not singling out a certain industry. Basically, that's my 2 cents or 1 cent. Exactly.
I kind of stepped on Commissioner Milligan's thought. I don't know if staff wanted to respond.
Oh, no, I was just going to say point taken. Yeah, I appreciate the comments.
All right, and then I think I might wrap this up unless our commission decides to want to ask more questions. I just had a question real quickly, Thomas, with U policy F4, I believe. Ensure all septic systems in the city are monitored and inspected according to Seattle-King County Department of Health regulations. Allow existing single-family homes with septic systems to continue to use them, provided that the systems are functioning properly, as documented by Seattle-King County Health Department. I guess, is that, who would bear the cost of that? Sounds expensive. The part about the single-family homes with the septic systems. Seems like someone's going to come out and assess them.
So is the question who will bear the cost of the system being monitored?
Yes.
I don't know.
Are they?
Yeah. You want to tag in, Stephen? Do you have any idea?
We'll look into the operations of that and see who bears the cost of the inspections. To Commissioner Milligan's point, that is required, but we're not quite sure who bears the cost of that.
Okay. Jumped out at me. Having said that, are there any further questions or comments as far as the utility section? Vice Chair Bader.
Just one little thing that I just noticed now is that the utilities element has an implementation policy or goal, and like transportation doesn't. And so is that going to be like tagged on to all of them? Because I like that that's in here, which basically says we're actually going to do and measure what we say we're going to do. And so I think that's like an important little policy there, but it's not in transportation. And so is it going to be, or like across all the elements, like an implementation policy?
Yeah, we can certainly add that. We do have the mobility master plan, so it's not to say that we're not doing it.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'm assuming
yeah,
that this is
yeah,
not just all
that's
talk and
a
no
fair
action.
point. Yeah, I do believe it's in most of the other elements as well.
All right, going once. There we go, Commissioner Samueta.
So just one thing, it says, like one of the policies is policy U, policy B5 says, and I'm just reading one of the pieces because I'm talking to climate change. It says consider climate change essentially for public services and facilities. Is that in tandem with the state policies as opposed to, is Issaquah looking at climate change on itself, or is it more so married to what the state does?
I would say that state, regional, county, we're all looking at it. I think Issaquah has been a leader in the area. We're even more focused than I would say the county is. So yeah, we recently certified LEED. I forget which.
In gold.
Yeah, LEED Gold. So I mean, we are very serious about this. And yeah, I think this is just sort of another reflection of our seriousness towards that. We do want to design our facilities so that they're meeting the latest standards, and we want to sort of be that leader in this area.
And then even from a land perspective as well, with impervious area and flooding as well in the, whether you say the land use codes, as climate change happens, places are getting hotter, places are getting colder, and how are we looking towards that to prepare for that? I know it's ever changing and whatnot, but I guess where do we get that direction from, and how is it implemented in the sense like, hey, if you have 10 more hotter days in the next 5 years, then energy costs are going to go up. Or if we have flooding events, and this goes to natural disasters and whatnot, or that extreme as opposed to something that becomes normal through climate change, having to build larger storm drain pipes to address a higher frequency storm, basically.
Yeah, I know that the city, we're really looking at resiliency a lot these days. We developed get the name of the document.
The climate vulnerability assessment
yes.
that's recently completed looks specifically at a lot of those in terms of city risks and how we might prepare for different mitigations and different climate emergencies.
Exactly, and then how it, I guess where I'm asking is, and it's probably still in its infancy, of course, and how it'll be implemented when a developer comes in, or when we're doing a new public facility as well. We have our existing codes that they're going to be designing to, but we also, I want to make sure it's not just a blanket statement. It has to be implementable, and I think it's still in that stage where it's going to come in phases per se. So I just wanted to make that statement and to have something that we're looking at so we can make it more enforceable or implementable.
Yeah, we definitely, we try our best to address that in the updates of the functional plans. So many of these utility plans that were recently updated are reflecting the latest, design standards and, really thinking about the flow, the service goals that we have, but also like thinking about ways to be adaptive to future needs. So these plans are updated every so often as design standards change, as the latest engineering best practices are put out. We will consistently update these, and so it's incremental change. This is like you said. It's definitely on our radar, and it will be reflected through functional plan updates and making sure that we're addressing the needs of where we're at now, but also like moving into the future.
And those are reviewed over like 5 years or every year, essentially.
Yeah, I'm not sure specifically how often the plans are reviewed. Some of the utility plans were not updated too recently, whereas others are.
Yeah, and I guess
updated more
practically you can't update it every year because it'll throw essentially the economy off, but probably at a certain interval, 5 years or whichever. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, commissioners. If there's no more questions for Thomas, did you get everything you needed?
I did. Thank you, Chair Voice.
All right. Well, thank you, Thomas, again for the presentations. We're now going to move along to the last regular business item, which is the draft capital facilities element for the comprehensive plan periodic update. And Stephen Padua, our long-range planning manager, is presenting. So, Stephen, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Voice. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me. So tonight I'm going to talk about the capital facilities element, and very similar to the other elements, we have questions for you to help with the discussion tonight. Does the commission have any feedback on the proposed updates? Does the draft vision accurately describe what's desired for capital facilities in terms of like what we want out of this element? Are there proposed goals and policies consistent with the land use element goals and policies that the commission's previously discussed and reviewed? Are there topics not being addressed in the goals and policies for this element? So the capital facilities element, just as a little background information, is a required element from the Growth Management Act in terms of what is required to come out of our comprehensive plans. And the original inception of the comprehensive plan, it included this. We are now updating it to what we are looking for in our capital facilities through this periodic update. Similar to the utilities element, the capital facilities element is taking into account updates on recent functional plans, the utility system plans, the recent adopted capital improvement plan, the transportation element updates, and our major considerations for how we want to approach the transit system through the transit study. The implementation of this element is primarily through the city budget, but it's has a circular relationship with a lot of the other functional plans in terms of if the parks systems plan comes up with new projects, it'll update what goes into the capital facilities plan and how we approach those. So very similar to transportation, very similar to utilities, it has that circular relationship. So organization for this element is relatively simpler than some of the other elements. We have level of service, which is a required component of the capital facilities element to address it for our 6-year CIP, but also for capital facilities. We also are introducing more language around sustainability. And then similar to the other elements, we have results and accountability to recognize how the goals and policies are being implemented through different functional plans. Recommended changes for this element, similar to the other elements, we are putting the lens of reducing redundancy to simplify the use of the comprehensive plan as a tool, as well as trying to make sure that we are identifying the important policies that go into the comprehensive plan. similar to what or just what I said, sustainability is being recognized through this element, similar with the review of the other elements, and we're introducing language around implement. Really quick, the goals and policies, goal B, we're updating on the level of service standards and simplifying the language around school level of service. A lot of the language for these goals and policies, we're taking out some of the detail primarily because some of the language that's in there is now inaccurate, but also we want to broaden the language so it's at the level for the comprehensive plan to recognize the functional plans and standards that we have in place now, as well as any future additions that we include to help with implementation of what's in this element. For the new sustainable and equitable practices, X2, we are introducing kind of a new set of policies with this goal at the recommendation of the environmental board to consider for the capital facilities element. And then lastly, it's recognition of the implementation of functional plans that goes into how the capital facilities element gets implemented by the city. Timing next steps, we continue working through the analysis and having the discussions with the boards and commissions on updating a lot of the elements for this periodic update. And we're working towards drafting and review of the drafts in Q2, Q1, early next year. So returning back to the questions, your voice.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Right. Questions from our commissioners. I know Commissioner Krass has gone first twice now. Oh. Give it time here, slow burn. Look at that, Thomas. Stephen might get off lucky. Commissioner Patterson.
Just justifying the no comment. I think these all look pretty straightforward to me, to be honest. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of it was simplification and required updates, so I don't really have any comments.
Vice Chair Bader.
I have a clarification because I've been like not Googling, but like searching my little document. You said like there was a policy X2 about sustainability and equity, but I don't see it.
It was the goal. I might have wrote it down wrong, but
Okay.
the goal for, or the goal area for sustainability.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I was like,
That might be a typo in my presentation. Well, maybe if I could prod a little bit for discussion. You know, the discussion with the environmental board on the new sustainability policies was focused on trying to coordinate a lot of the language in the capital facilities element with what's intended through the new environmental stewardship and climate resilience element that's been put together with the environmental board. Some of that language is covered in the new element. Some of what's introduced in this one is try to make it this element specific, but there is overlap with what we have in the other policies. So maybe I'll ask the questions, does the commission want to keep those new policies in the capital facilities element to maintain some of that coordination between the two elements, knowing that there's a little redundancy with the other element?
I think if it's only pertinent, I mean, again, one of the things that is, the question we were having earlier is that, I think Commissioner Kraft was mentioning it, you know, trying to help developers. It's not that our standards are getting less. The whole idea between this and Title 18 was to make things more clear and concise. So I guess that would be my only 2 cents right off the top of my head. Vice Chair Bader.
can I I'm going to indirectly answer the question because for capital facilities specifically, when I think of sustainability, I don't just think of the environment. I think of is this going to meet the need right, of the community for a long time. So like more sustainability of like whatever it is it's doing. And so I don't know. I don't know if that needs to be called out actually as part of sustainability too, as opposed to just environmental sustainability.
Nope, there we go. Commissioner Samweta.
So I guess the question would be, if a developer is involved in a capital facility, would they be looking at this policy or these codes, or would they be looking at the environmental codes?
They would look at both. So within the comprehensive plan, we want to try to recognize the higher level topics of what we're wanting in the code and the regulations. So specifically when they're looking at the permitting process, they're going to look at what's required in the code and looking back at what's the justification for the
I guess the key thing in the capital facilities plan is to make sure that it references the environmental code as well. And I think it's more so, I think it all depends on you guys or the people making the code to make sure that they're consistent over the years. So you're going to be updating in 2 areas as opposed to 1. So I don't see any issue with it on my end, and I'm pretty sure the developers may not have an issue, but I think it's more so on yourselves.
Commissioner Kraft?
I guess I would just say is, when you talk about, answer your question about whether things should be in 2 places, it comes down to like who's the user and who's the manager of those things. And if you feel like it's helpful to the people who are using these and you can manage it without things getting out of sync, then do what you got to do on that. So I don't think that's one way. I like the overall cleanup, but it's impossible to be perfect one way or the other.
Commissioner Milligan?
You begged for a comment, so I'm going to give you one. Under sustainability, F2 and F3, the F2 is the one that says that achieve sustainable building certifications where applicable. And then the other one says new capital facilities should consider sustainability practices, et cetera. Those seem redundant. Under F3, it says all the different categories: greenhouse emissions, low carbon construction, water use reduction, those sorts of things. But those things should be in a sustainable building certification already. So that one I would maybe revisit and see if the sustainable building certification, I know we didn't want to say which one or what it was. There was a whole bunch of conversation about that. But maybe if that were specified better so that you didn't need F3.
Commissioner Patterson?
I feel like this is directly challenging my compliment from earlier. I think, and where to go off of that is, I would say, looking again at these sustainability policies in here, is what is specific to capital facilities. If there's a way to streamline that piece and avoid making it so we have to, like Commissioner Kraft was saying, like update everything everywhere. If we can hone in on like what specifically is about capital facilities and list it here, knowing that the sustainability piece, or I guess the environment piece, is located somewhere else. Like we know that where the specifics are addressed, but we're applying it directly to capital facilities here. So if there's an opportunity to streamline that, I think we should take it. That way my compliment stands. Thank you.
Commissioner Samweta?
I like seeing it in both places, but I feel that, let's say a year down, 2 years down, there may be one place that it may have been missed. And that's where it's going to cause issues when people are going through design and doing their developments, basically. And that's somewhat the concern that I have on that.
I think actually is a really great comment. And, as part of the review, particularly looking through all the different elements, is making sure that we don't have the same language replicated. And I think Commissioner Patterson's comments of trying to make it more specific to this element makes the most sense, so that we're not having that same level of redundancy, that we're now complicating updates in the future.
Debater.
Yeah, that Commissioner Issaquah just made me think of who like uses this. So is this primarily like the city uses to like inform decisions, or is it used by someone external who like might not know to also go to this element?
The capital facilities element will primarily inform what goes into our standards for capital facilities. So it'll inform what goes in our design standards, construction standards, kind of at the broader level. So it's, I think it's more internal. So external users might want to see what's the justification for having certain standards in place, and so they can reference what's in the comprehensive plan. Or they might say, you know, you might want to strengthen that language in the comprehensive plan in order to better support new technology or new practices kind of built in.
Yeah, because that makes sense to like reduce redundancy, but from like a user friendly, it's kind of like a minimizing clicks thing, right? Like if it's here and there, but it matches, like then I don't have to go look for it somewhere else.
All right, any further comments? Steven, more prodding? You get what you needed.
I got everything I needed. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Going once. Going twice. We will move on. So thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. And now we will lead towards the end of our meeting with City Council update. So I'm not quite sure who's going to be providing these, but we'll just address it as staff if they have any updates.
Chair Voice, that'll be me tonight.
Okay.
So last night, the Planning Development Environment Council Committee reviewed the housing work plan and provided some recommendations on how to approach doing reviewing different programs as part of the recommendations that came out of that Eco Northwest report that was sent out to the Commission a month or two ago. They also reviewed the environmental element and provided some recommendations on how to approach some of the policy questions that were provided by the Environmental Board. So if you're wanting to review that meeting from last night, that should be available. Yesterday was also World Town Planning Day. The city adopted a proclamation on Monday declaring yesterday World Town Planning Day. This is in recognition of planners, but also the work that the Commission does. A lot of these discussions help us be able to shepherd new policies throughout the city. And so this proclamation is really appreciation for you as much as it is for us on a lot of the contribution you provide for these discussions, as well as the development of new policies that the city considers. So thank you.
And thank you, staff. Where we would be without our planners. And even the planners aren't here tonight. Okay, that takes care of our city council updates. Stephen, other business and announcements. I know we have a special meeting next week.
Yes, so next week we'll be meeting with the Economic Vitality Commission at Tibbetts Creek Manor. You should have received invites from our Economic Development Manager. If you haven't, please let me know. Oh, okay. Yeah, email was kind of the invitation. But if you need more information, please let me know about the logistics for that meeting. We're also polling for our early December meeting. Please let me know if you're available to potentially meet on December 7th instead of the regularly scheduled December 14th meeting.
We won't hold anyone to it, but who thinks they can make it to the December 7th? Yeah. So obviously that could change, but
yeah, please look at your schedules, and if you see a conflict, please let me know.
And then the Tibbetts Creek, that is a 6 o'clock meeting.
That will be at 6 o'clock
Yes.
next week. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, 6 o'clock Wednesday, and I believe the agenda was actually sent out earlier this evening. So, okay. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Anything else from the commission? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry. I saw you putting your glasses away. Thought that was a hand. With there being no further business, we will close tonight's meeting out at 8:09 p.m. Thanks, everyone.